It is now my honor to introduce our next speaker. Malcolm Hoenlein is the Executive Vice Chairman and CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, the coordinating body for 53 national Jewish organizations. He received his BA from Temple University and completed his doctoral coursework at the University of Pennsylvania, where he taught international relations and was a Middle East specialist at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. He was a founding executive director of the JCRC of Greater New York and of the Greater New York Conference on Soviet Jewry. Mr. Hoenlein appears regularly in the media, has 3 weekly national radio broadcasts, and has lectured and met leading officials from around the world. He has received numerous awards from U.S. and foreign governments and institutions, including 4 honorary doctorates. Malcolm has been involved in Latin America for a long time and has prioritized the region even when the United States and the Jewish community has not been focused on it. Malcolm has helped push the region to understand the true nature of the Iranian regime and its proxy Hezbollah, ensuring that leaders in the political and Jewish communities understand the threat posed to their security interests. Malcolm has worked to unify the Jewish community in understanding the continuing and increasing threat from anti-Semitism and has been a leader in combating it. We're honored to have Malcolm Hoenlein here with us to provide keynote remarks in commemoration of the attack on the AMIA. Please join me in welcoming Malcolm Hoenlein.
When I got up this morning at 4 o'clock in New York, felt that I became another victim of the AMIA attack. But when Joseph summons, you don't ask, you just come. In the same way that Joseph responds every time to every request, and he has been a friend and a mentor, and I'm proud to be able to say we work very closely together, and hopefully we have made a difference, and he certainly has been the leader on this issues and related issues. Mr. Cronin, I want to thank the sponsors and everyone who made this possible. The question is, why do we remember? You know, Judaism puts special emphasis on remembrance. It's called Zechirah in Hebrew. The great commandments, the Sabbath, remembering the Exodus, are given in the context of remembrance. But remembrance isn't history. There's no Hebrew word for history. Remembrance is a dynamic process. You have to know what leads up to it, and you have to know what follows from it. It's not as if you're a reporter and say at that place, at that time, an incident took place. You have to know what are the causal factors and what are the results if you're going to recognize them in the future, if you're going to understand how to confront them. For us, history is about the future, because what we do today determines that future. What lessons we learn from the past helps us assure that future generations will have a more secure future. I was asked to talk about why the AMIA bombing remains so salient, why we remember it, why we talk about it. And I had the privilege to visit the site on several occasions, and we are in regular contact with the leaders of the AMIA and DAIA and others in the Jewish community in Argentina. So for us, these remembrances, recalling what happened, reliving it even, is essential because of our obligation to future generations. Winston Churchill once said, the further back you look, the further ahead you will see. Our sages said it 1,000 years earlier. But it is a critical lesson because the secrets of the past are the keys to the future. And only by understanding what really happened can we understand how we can prevent it in the future. Given the rise of anti-Semitism, of Jew hatred, extremism, terrorism, it makes it all the more important that we learn the lessons of the past, and in this case, the incomplete lessons. We learn from the mistakes and the successes, from the good and the evil. We learn the warning signs and recognize patterns. We learn how we must act and react, to hold to account perpetrators and their abettors, those who are directly involved in atrocities and those who support, who fuel, who cover for them, or refuse to take a stand against them. Why has the AMIA attack touched all of us and so many so deeply and sustained? The outrage around the world, despite the passage of 2.5 decades and the commemorations that have been held over the recent days. Certainly the magnitude of this barbaric act taking the worst toll of any attack in Latin America. But there was more. The attack was like an open laboratory of terror and hate, where we could see all the moving parts, the components and contributors, the failures before and after, the sabotage by officials and the media distortions, the diversions and cover-ups, all in full view of every open eye. From the top down, the never-ending experiment from which we can and must learn so much. It was a crucible in which the ingredients of death and destruction were mixed as many watched and many were silent. We must assure that no one escapes culpability. No one. Not then, not now, not in the future. The AMIA bombing resonates as it was the end of the age of deniability in Argentina, Latin America, and the world. As the attacks on the synagogues here in Pittsburgh and California were the end of the age of innocence for American Jews and America. No longer could anyone say they didn't know, as so many tried 70 years ago after the Holocaust. 85 martyrs, 11 dead in Pittsburgh. So many others testify to the contrary. By failing to act decisively 25 years ago, we gave Iran and Hezbollah a license to kill, and they have used it against countless innocent people. And they got a pass to incite, to recruit, to organize, to execute. And they did and continue to do so. The AMIA bombing did not give rise to the surge of anti-Semitism that we are witnessing, but it gave it new legitimacy and impetus. For its aftermath, a more blatant, open, virulent campaign with neo-Nazi parties in several countries emerging, and Iran spurned to widespread hate-filled campaigns on the internet, thousands of anti-Semitic actions and violations. Had the leadership then brought them to justice, maybe it would have been different. This was a pivotal event for Argentinian Jews, for Argentina, for diaspora communities of Jews around the world that saw the murderous anti-Semitism was a reality, and too many again turned a blind eye. Little was learned in the 6 decades by the world. Will they still continue to try to hide behind some false cloak of ignorance, as so many did after 1945? It wasn't that they didn't know, they did not want to know. The AMIA attack was a turning point in the declared ongoing war centered in Tehran, with other satellite capitals against the Jewish people, the Jewish faith, the Jewish religion, and the Jewish state, and others. It continues to take innocent victims in Israel and around the world. Many thought that Israel was ground zero for actions against Jews, for terrorism against Jews. But we see that others suffered attacks, but that it seemed always far away, somehow distant. Even perhaps the attack on the Israeli embassy was treated that way. The devastating sound of the explosion at AMIA brought the message to all. It can happen everywhere, and it is. All the rules changed. The psychology of a community, even of a country, changed. The reaction to the vicious, cowardly terrorism was a tsunami of emotion felt from New York to Jerusalem, from Paris to Miami, everywhere. It became a global event with long-term significance and implications. We see the extent of Iran's malign intent, and we see its extensive reach directly and through its subsidiaries. It shows that all are endangered by such terrorism, especially from a radical extremist regime that has global hegemonic designs and has no moral, legal, or political limits. Human rights, like human life, are mere obstacles for them that are easily dismissed or ignored, even in their own country. All of us have an obligation to help to continue the pursuit of justice, for the safety of all is at risk when these murderers are at large, especially when some occupy positions of importance and have a government behind them. We have to make sure that we urge everyone to join the battle against Jew hatred and anti-Semitism, against racism in all its forms, against terrorism, and against those who support it, against indifference above all. That is, in fact, the greatest danger that we face. While Jews are often the first victims, we're never the last. We see that in the words of Pastor Niemuller, whose very potent words remind us of it. Jews are often described as the canary in the mine, or the barometer for the conscience of mankind. I, for one, am sick and tired of the memorials for dead Jews, though I appreciate the intent of most. I'm tired of commemorations for Jews who were murdered, for destroyed Jewish communities. I want the world and its leaders to stand up for living Jews, for vibrant Jewish people, and a safe and vital Jewish state. No more crocodile tears, no more hollow pledges. We want to see clear declarations, clear actions, that never again has to become a meaningful pledge, that perpetrators will be held to account, as will their accomplices. Justice must be achieved. There can be no exceptions, no excuses. Before the next anniversary, I pray that many countries will follow the courageous example of President Mauricio Macri and declare Hezbollah a terrorist organization and apply sanctions. There is no exaggerating the importance of this decision, the first in South America, when too many exploit and are exploited by Hezbollah. It is a strong message at home and abroad and must be joined by others. First, by dropping the fictional distinction between a so-called political arm and a military wing of Hezbollah. They are one deadly machine, linked together. They are inextricable and have a leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world standing behind it. I take the threats of Iran seriously. I take the threats of Nasrallah seriously. Dictators tell the truth. Leaders of democracies lie, but dictators tell the truth. And we have to take their words seriously. Hitler told us what he would do, Stalin told us what he would do, but people didn't take it seriously. The words of Khomeini have to be taken seriously. He means it, and he seeks the means to do it. A unified front is essential. We have to stand together across all boundaries, geographic, religious, political, ideological, to ensure that they will ultimately face justice, that they will be put on notice, that we know that words of terror leads to acts of terror, that we will take their threats seriously, that we will act against them preemptively to make sure that they do not become a reality. We salute the announcement by the United States, by the Secretary of State, that the U.S. will provide additional funds, $7 million, to reward, to capture those responsible. It's not that we don't know who they are. Their names are known to all of you and to all of us. We know where they are. And for too long, they have been able to travel to escape because countries not willing to act. We know Rafsanjani and Veliati and Rabbani and Vahidi. We know all of them. We know what they look like. We know where they go. And yet there isn't the courage to act against them. And we must, of course, acknowledge a hero of all of this in Mr. Nisman, whom I had the privilege to know and to meet and to host in New York. We remember this true hero in a saga that doesn't have many. And that Albert Nassimi, who paid with his life for his integrity and his unyielding commitment and for his involvement. Is there really a doubt what happened to him? Are we going to continue to let the fiction live? The price he paid for the readiness to expose the collusion of high government officials, law enforcement, judiciary, and others. No, there is no doubt, not in our minds. In 2013, we know Mr. Nassimi's 500-page report, which detailed the Iran terrorist network, would put him on notice and make him a target. These reports go back to events of over 20 years. And 2 years later, he released the results of the investigation alleging that President Fernandez de Kirchner and Foreign Minister Timmerman conspired to cover up Iran's role and agreed to negotiate immunity and to remove the red notices of Interpol on these Iranian leaders. No, we're not going to hide it anymore. Each of us has an obligation, if we care about the security of our children, of our grandchildren, and of all other children in the world, that there has to be action taken. Interpol has the red cards on them. They have to be exercised, and the governments, they've traveled to more than 20 countries, have to be ready to turn them over. No more excuses, no more exceptions. It is tragic that the families of those killed and those wounded should have been burdened and have suffered so long. Closure is denied to them. I pray, I appeal to all of you to make sure that we act now, as Joseph has done, as we heard from Senator Cruz, as we heard from the Department of Justice. No more excuses, no more exceptions.